Hola chicos, so this is our last presentation and it's about this wonderful artist and also considered a genius, Salvador Dali. One of the things that he said that I really liked it and even enjoyed is have no fear of perfection because you'll never reach it. And I partially agree with him. Perfection, I don't know if it really exists. Okay, but then he also said there is only one difference between a madman and me, and it's that the madman thinks he's sane, and I know I'm mad, which says a lot about his personality and what he thought of himself and the rest of artists. So this peculiar personality is shown in some of the pictures that we have of him because he is a more contemporary artist, so we have more documentation on the person and the artist. He had a very strong personality, and that caused him not to have very many friends in his life. But also he had an amazing personality that you can see, for example, in this picture photography that he took himself. The most important influences in his life and art are Caracas, his hometown, Velázquez, for obvious reasons, and the Surrealists. Okay? So let's start with his biography and major life events, the early years. He was born in 1904 in Figueras, Spain, and he was born 9 months after the death of his brother. His parents always treated him as a prince and maybe as the dead son reborn. That's him with his sister Ana Maria and their father Don Salvador. Also, when his mother Felipa died, Dali was traumatized, and shortly afterwards, also his father married his mother's sister, and Dali never approved of this relationship, so that strained the relationship between the two of them almost forever. He was considered a child prodigy, and he painted this work of art when he was 6, if you remember. We saw it in the first couple of days of our course. And there was this person, the artist Ramon Pichot, who was a friend of the family, and he encouraged Dali to pursue a painting career. About the art school, the Surrealist, and the relationship with them. During 4 years, he attended the Real Academia de Bellas Artes de San Fernando in Madrid, and he stayed in the Residencia de Estudiantes de Madrid, where also Lorca and other intellectuals were staying, like Buñuel, the cinema director. But he was expelled permanently from there for causing unrest before his final exams. Basically, he said that no one in that school had the skills that were good enough to be able to evaluate his work, that no one actually was good enough to evaluate his work. And that's him with his friend Dali. And apart from Dali, sorry, his was friend with Lorca. Sorry about that. And apart from Lorca, he had a fascination with Velázquez, and influenced by that artist, that's why he decided to grow his flamboyant mustache, and it became an iconic trademark of his appearance for the rest of his life. Dali considered Velázquez to be superior to any other painter ever. And then he had this short connection with the Surrealists, but he was expelled from the group. Amongst other things, he said, the difference between the surrealist and myself is that I am a surrealist. So you can imagine why they decided not to have him anymore in the group. But then something happened, and it's the fact that he met Gala. Ever since they met, they were never apart, not a single day. And he was his only wife, friend, muse, and pretty much everything that he needed. For example, with her,
Bonjour, good morning. Is from the first time Dali for any kind of traumatism. Little blood, symbolic blood, and milk again, milk of today bottle, and some simple fish of Mediterranean.
well, you can see from this video what's Dali like and his relationship with Gala. And the two of them lived in the US for around 10 years. And that's, for example, where they met some people on the set of a film by Alfred Hitchcock. He also met Walt Disney. They were at the premiere of The Sound of Music. And he met also celebrities of the time like Marlon Brando. At the end of his life and career, he decided to build and fill with most of his works his museum that you can find again in Figueras. And some of his most representative works are there. And together with the works, we have some recurrent images like the eggs, the ants, the lobsters, and the crutches. Eggs are a symbol of hope and love. Ants are generally used for death and sexual desire. Then lobsters are a symbol of waste and fear. Together with that, we have the crutches, a symbol of weakness, the sea urchins as a model of symmetry, and then the snails, normally representing the human head. About his main stages, we can say that they can be divided into 4 different ones. The first one, the early works, then some transition. This transition takes us to the Surrealist period, and then after the Surrealism, we have classical, but not classicals in the sense of like Renaissance classical, but classical Dali. So let's have a look at some of these stages and the works produced during them. So the early works are based mostly in his life in Catalonia, in Figueras, the history, the traditions, Cadaqués en el Mar, and he's got a little bit of mixture between Impressionism, Cubism, and the Baroque time period. We have this self-portrait, for example, fish with red ball, that reminds us a little bit of some of the Baroque still lifes. And his sister Ana Maria would be basically his only model, but also almost his only friend until he met Gala, his wife. This is her in the very famous picture Girl at a Window, one of my favorite ones by Dali. And it's also said that he had an on and off relationship with Picasso, and not always friendly. The two of them first met in 1925, as you know. And there were some rumors that they didn't like each other, as we mentioned, but here's a video that says otherwise.
Y luego está la vieja historia de sus discrepancias con Picasso. Esto es absolutamente falso. Los periodistas se han siempre entojado, porque nuestras pinturas son completamente distintas, a creer que estamos reñidos. Es todo lo contrario. Picasso, que es un ser muy generoso, fue el único que me prestó dinero para irme a América. Y ahora se acaba de encontrar un documento que será sensacional, se va a exponer en Londres, en el cual hay la colaboración en un grabado de Picasso con Dalí, lo que no ha hecho con ningún otro artista. O sea, era un diálogo. Él me daba la plancha con una silla, por ejemplo, un poco antropomórfica, y yo el día siguiente le añadía 2 huevos fritos. Entonces él, encima de los huevos fritos, ponía una espiga de maíz. Es decir, es una cosa hecha en colaboración.
Fueron ustedes entonces buenos amigos.
Muy buenos amigos, y cuando se abrió el Museo Picasso en Barcelona, yo regalé, me parece, 50 grabados y Gala un collage magnífico que está allí.
Well, you can see that he tried to explain that the relationship between them was good and how they influenced each other. We can see all that in these two paintings, that if you didn't know the first one, the one on top was Picasso's, you wouldn't probably guess it. So after this early period, we move into the transition period with a time of experimentation with new influences like Luis Buñuel or John Miro that had a great liberating effect on Dali. Some of the cubists like Pablo Picasso, as we mentioned, and Braque. And he started to experiment with different textures, like this painting where he used, for example, like real sand to create it. And then he moved towards surrealism after he met Freud in 1938 in London. And with Freud's influence, he started to depict the irrational and how dreams are confused with reality. For example, these first days of spring, that looks a little bit like our spring this year, quite crazy. And one of his most famous paintings, The Persistence of Memory, and it's quite small. If you haven't seen it, it's quite small. The size is not too big. It's like an A4 type of paper. And it only took him 2 hours to finish it. However, it's really intriguing and quite interesting as a painting. So he was becoming quite popular, quite famous, and he was even on the cover of Time magazine. But around that time, if you look at the date, it's 1936, so it's the beginning of civil war in Spain, and it's when he created this work known as soft construction with boiled beans, or premonition of civil war, that we will discuss more in detail together with the persistence of memory. From this time period, the surrealism type of time period, we have also the metamorphosis of Narcissus, or the endless enigma, how you can see like different figures portrayed, the dog, the man at the same time, or this one, my wife nude contemplating her own flesh, and my absolute favorite by Dali, which is this Galatea of the Spheres. It's a portrait of Gala, but it's also a tribute to the scientific progress, while at the same time returning to the Renaissance type of realism. You can see that he uses linear perspective with a vanishing point in the middle. And he tries to show his fascination with nuclear physics at this stage, that he will also use in the last period, the classical period, classical Dali, where we see a change of interest. He moves from personal obsessions to more universal type of themes. He was kind of fascinated by religion and modern science, and he wanted to unite science, religion, and mysticism in a unique type of concept. From this last period, we also have the phase of war, right after the end of civil war in Spain. Old age, adolescence, and infancy, the three ages, as a tribute also to one of Velázquez's painting, if you remember, the Three Ages of Men or the Water Cellar. The portrait of Picasso that we have already seen. This other painting called The Dream Caused by the Flight of a Bee Around a Pomegranate a Second Before Awakening. But if you want to talk about this painting to anybody, you would normally say it's The Tigers by Dali. And then another long title, Interatomic Balance of a Swan's Feather or Feather Equilibrium. And also a funny painting called Dali Nude in Contemplation Before the Five Regular Bodies, where we can see how he depicts himself almost as a deity and how he stops the water from like a biblical passage. And then his depiction of Last Supper, where we see not the disciples, but we see more like a gang. And when they went to the United States, we have the discovery of America, as if they were discovering the land to the people of the United States. He also did this Christ of the Trash that you can see next to his museum, and another version of Gala contemplating the Mediterranean Sea, where we see the figure of Gala. But is there anybody else portrayed in the painting? Yes, I'm sure that you guessed it. So, summing up, we have the early works, the transition period, the surrealism, and classical. Okay, so to see a little bit of his personality, I uploaded this video that shows Dali in an old program called What's My Line? And he confuses the contestants so much, but it shows very well how he was and what a different personality he had. Let's see also a little bit about his Don Quixote collection. He had this fascination with the character because he was different from anybody else, and he always liked to feel different also from the rest. He thought of making a total number of 25, but he had finished number 14 when he felt sick, and then he finished the collection with a total of 15 in 1980. This is one of the examples. That's my favorite of the collection, and some others here. And finally, about his final years and final paintings, we have this apparition of the visage of Aphrodite. Quite intriguing as well. And he didn't do too many works because Gala died in 1982, and that left him quite devastated. She was buried in the castle that Dali had bought for her, and then he didn't feel the energy to continue painting or creating too much. This is his last work called The Swallow's Tail, and that's him posing next to it, but you can see he's already looking quite old. And he died in January 1989, and his remains are in the museum in Figueras again. And I have also an interview where he even calls himself a madman, but listen precisely to what he says.
¿Cómo se siente usted siendo el pintor más famoso del mundo? Es que no sé si soy el pintor más famoso del mundo, porque hay mucha gente que me pidan por la calle autógrafos y realmente no saben si soy un cantante, un actor de cine, un loco, un escritor, no se sabe bien lo que soy.
So just to finish with it, the final set of productions and the different achievements. For example, he created over 1,000 paintings, almost 350 drawings, 128 watercolors, and over 70 pieces of art. Let's see some examples of each of them, like the paintings, the drawings, the watercolors, the pieces of art. He's got quite a few of those. Who wouldn't like to have this chest of drawers at their home? And then this brooch, if you remember also from the first couple of days, this chair, and the lips that, believe it or not, are the lips of Mae West. And finally, his very famous lobster telephone. He also did some photography. It took him a while to achieve this one because they didn't have digital photography. It was all with traditional ways of creating photographs. And some other examples of photography are these. So to wrap up with this wonderful artist, we have some facts and figures. The first one would be 17 million, which is the amount of money that somebody paid for his portrait of Paul Luard. Almost 1.5 visitors that go every year to the Dali Museum, and 28 times that he had to recreate the painting Dali Atomicus. And also he was in charge of creating the logo for the Chup Chups company. And finally, about his painting, the persistence of memory that has become ingrained in pop culture, and you can see it here. And I have a final figure. That figure is 70,200,000, which is actually the number of seconds that we could spend together and that I'm grateful for. And I have one final quote for you, which says, "There are some days when I think I'm going to die from an overdose of satisfaction," by Salvador Dali, but it's also how I feel and how I felt every day when I was in class with you. So thank you everyone for a great semester, and I'll miss you all.